الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah At-Taghabun, Surah number 64, Surah At-Taghabun, Surah number 64 and verse number 15. Verse number 15 in Surah At-Taghabun. We'll start with the recitation inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة والله عنده أجر عظيم. فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم واسمعوا وأطيعوا وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم واسمعوا وأطيعوا وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون. إن تقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا إن تقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا يضاعفه لكم يضاعفه لكم ويغفر لكم والله شكور حليم. عالم الغيب والشهادة العزيز الحكيم. إنما أموالكم, there is the mad and the nun الشدة, وأولادكم فتنة. You stop at the ha. If you continue تنوين after it واو إضغام وضغنة فتنة والله عند إخفاء والله عنده. then you have mad أجر عظيم and the جيم متقلقلة أجر عظيم. فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم and the ta is heavy and before it ta and they both come from the same place, so that's why they have to be different from one than the other. ما استطعتم واسمعوا, make sure that the mad is the normal mad. واسمعوا وأطيعوا and the ta is heavy. وأنفقوا إخفاء وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم خيرا لي, this is إدغام without غنة, and then you have the إخفاء خيرا لأنفسكم. ومن يوق, this is إدغام with غنة. ومن يوق شح نفسه, as you see there's no مد here, ومن يوق شح نفسه, and نفسه like this, as you see the small ya after the ha, to stress the kasra. فأولئك مد هم المفلحون, هم المفلحون. إن تقرضوا, that's إخفاء. إن تقى, and the قاف والسكون قلقلة, you make قلقلة. إن تقى, إن تقرضوا, and the ra is light and the dot is heavy. Let's repeat this one. إن تقرضوا, إن تقى, تقى, ري, تقرضوا, ضو, it's heavy. تقرضوا, تقرضوا, إن تقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا. This is إظهار. قرضا حسني, تنوين after it, ياء إدغام بغنة. يضاعفه, as you see there is a سكون on the فاء, so يضاعف, يضاعفه, يضاعفه لكم. ويغفر, the ra is light, ويغفر لكم, ويغفر لكم. والله شكور حليم, إظهار, as you see the noon inverted, شكور, because you have to say it without غنة. عالم الغيب والشهادة العزيز الحكيم. Ayah number 14 yesterday, is, and we went through it, and it was important to keep the meaning of it present at all times in our hearts, to act upon it, because it requires a continuous mujahada and struggling with oneself, because this is something that we face all the time. And it's, as without repeating what has been mentioned yesterday, but one of the great benefits is that the Quran gives us the warnings of everything that we need to be warned from, and it gives us how to deal with whatever we are warned from. So that is not even left to our own desires. If you're warned from something, what do? You will act. But how do you act? Not everybody acts in a wise way. So if someone is warned of a fire, for example, coming his way, they even teach people how to run away from it, or how to protect themselves from it. Everything has to be with ilm. And that's one of the great meanings in the Quran, if people reflect upon it. All of your enemies are mentioned in the Quran. Every single enemy is mentioned in the Quran. Those who want the worst evil to you, those who want evil for you, whatever the details of this. Then how to deal with every single enemy is also clearly stated in the Quran, how to deal with it. And you have to, as a believer, you have to prepare yourself that you submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in both ways. In knowing who's your enemy, don't leave it to yourself. And knowing how to deal with your enemy, don't leave it to yourself. Because you have to prepare yourself. Sometimes it's against your desire. Your desire, religious desire, that you have a desire for the deen. But this desire has to be according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And this ayah is example, clear example to this. Because as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned against some of the spouses and the children are enemies to the person, and what that means when it comes to matters of deen. So how to deal with them is وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا وَتَغْفِرُوا. Completely opposite to what a person might think of how to deal with this enmity if it shows from the closest ones of oneself. And as we said, in ta'fu wa tasfahu wa taghfiru, the three of them means the same thing, and that is to not act like to punish, but rather to forgive and to pardon. So the three is mu'akkidat. One stresses the meaning of the other, because it shows that how it's difficult to apply this when you have al-iman in your heart and someone is trying to take a portion of it or some of it, which is the most valuable thing in your life. And the other meaning is the details of the differences between al-af, wal-safh, wal-maghfirah, as mentioned yesterday. And whoever pardons, Allah pardons him. Whoever makes safh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will treat him accordingly. And the last thing was mentioned, which is a a principle, a benefit that if a person establish it, he will be successful in this life and in the hereafter, and it's worth the entire earth and whatever it contains of value. Which is, I would just read again the last statement that we read yesterday in the ayah. He says, وَمَنْ عَامَلَ اللَّهَ فِيمَا يُحِبُّ وعامل عباده كما يحبون وينفعهم نال محبة الله ومحبة عباده واستوثق له أمره. Whoever his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is according to what Allah loves, according to the love of Allah, seeking the pleasure of Allah. So it's a level higher than just what's the bare minimum, what's halal, what's haram, and that's it. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala love for the person to do. وَعَامَلَ عِبَادَهُ كَمَا يُحِبُّونَ وَيَنْفَعُهُم, and treat his relationship with the ibadah of Allah, with the rest, with the creation of Allah, is according to what they love and what's benefiting for them, without contradicting the first one, because the first one takes over. So if they love something that is against the pleasure of Allah, you don't listen to them, because this is harmful to them and harmful to you. But if it's according to what Allah loves for you, then this is the original. You know, when someone is his original status of things, is very important also to understand this meaning. What is your? I'm not sure if this is would make sense, but it's always something mentioned in matters of fiqh, in matters of the deen. You have to go from something original, and then exceptions can happen, but you always go back to the principle, to the foundation of things. What is the original status of water in fiqh? Is what? Al-asl in the water is what? Tahur, that it's pure, unless proven otherwise. You don't deal with water or it's najas till proven otherwise. No. Like the same thing, everyone is innocent till proven otherwise. You cannot start with that, no, everybody is a criminal. You have to prove that you're innocent. It doesn't work this way. The same thing with the water, the same thing with this, which means the way that you treat others, the original rule of it is what they love and what's benefiting for them. This is where you initiate your relationship, your actions, everything. But then, if what they love or what's benefiting for them, this is how they think is against even the slightest amount of being less than perfect love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you don't do it because you love them and you care for them. So, and this is with ilm, of course. Whoever does this, نال محبة Allah. He would attain the love of Allah and the love of the slaves of Allah, the human beings. واستوثق له أمره, and his affairs will be well established for him. So, as a result of that, إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة والله عنده أجر عظيم. Next ayah, which is ayah number 15. Your wealth and your children are only a fitna, a trial, whereas Allah with him is a great reward. So the previous ayah was some of the spouses, some of the offsprings are fitna. But here this ayah, إنما أموالكم وأولادكم, some of them are enemies to you. But in this ayah, your wealth and your children are fitna for you. And fitna is a trial. There's no specific thing here in Tafseer ibn Sa'di rahimahullah, because it's related to what's mentioned before. But innama here, as we always see innama in the Quran, tufid al-hasr, something that gives the exclusive meanings. But the meaning of exclusiveness of the sifa upon the mawsuf, on the characteristics, that means basically your wealth and your children are nothing but fitna, nothing else. And fitna is a trial, is a test. So they are a test for you. And fitna doesn't have to be necessarily something bad. It depends. It's a test. وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ fitna. We test you, we try you with evil and good as fitna for you. So good is fitna. Things that is good is fitna. Things that are bad are fitna. Meaning it's a test from Allah. So this is the one that created us, the one that gave us the wealth and the offsprings and so on. He's saying that that's all test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Test meaning, what is the meaning of test? To see who's obedient to Allah and who's not obedient to Allah based on these trials and tests. because most of the sins are based on these two things. One's wealth, so a person would disobey Allah or obey Allah, and relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this matter. And the same thing with the love that he has towards his children, towards his family. Would he be obedient to Allah or not? And that's why the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said, Al-waladu, majbana, abkhala, mahzana, and so on, the offspring, the closest ones to you are, they make you coward, they make you greedy, they make you sad or whatever, because of this fitna, because this test. So you want to spend for the sake of Allah or my children. You want to do something, oh, who's going to take care of my children? Like this, always having these worries. And this is part of the test. So the next ayah, إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة والله عنده أجر عظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala عنده, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the greatest reward. So if you treat them that way, and there are the means of fitna, whether it's good or bad, then the person will have the best of this life and in the after with regards to his wealth and his children. So the next ayah, فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم واسمعوا وأطيعوا وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون. Which means, so keep your duty to Allah and fear Him as much as you can. Listen and obey and spend in charity. That is better for yourselves. And whoever is saved from his own covetousness, then they are the successful ones. So here, very clear instructions. And this fa, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, is the like of a fa before we mentioned. They call it fa al-fasiha. Or fa fasiha, that means not fusha, but the same meaning of the fusha. That means it explains what have been mentioned before. It gives you the more details. You know, as if a person is concerned and he reads the previous verses, then he would say how to deal with it, how to deal with this fitna, how to deal with these trials in this life. So then now the ayah gives clear examples how to deal with your wealth, with your children, with all the different loves that you have in this life. And this is all to the believers. Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, يأمر تعالى بتقوى فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم. يأمر تعالى بتقوى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the people to be upon the taqwa of Allah, التي هي امتثال أوامره واجتناب نواهيه. What is the taqwa? To do what Allah commanded and to stay away from what Allah forbade. ويقيد ذلك بالاستطاعة والقدرة. يقيد, that means it's chained or it's conditioned with الاستطاعة, the ability, and or the one's capacity, and القدرة, the ability. So there is limit. You know, where a person, if he exceeds that, he will break down. He won't be able to do it. And al-qudra, the ability to do it. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. When you read the translation, sometimes people when they say, I did the best I can. With due all respect, every time somebody says this, it doesn't sound good. When someone says, I did the best I can. In relationships, you would find one of the spouses, I'm doing the best I can to make this marriage work, so whatever there is. This is not true, right? For the most part. It means a person have to humble himself, right? We always have room for, to work more and to do more. Even though the command is فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ means what is not the best you can according to what you think is the best you can. It's that if you do 1 inch, one thing more, you can't. You physically can't. You will die if you do it. I mean, this is the most you can. This is the best you can. This is what is meant here. So this is فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Because the command is فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Because the ayah فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ. Be obedient to Allah the way it ought to be. And this is something that nobody can attain this in the most perfect way. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for the believers. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And this ayah has so many different applications to it in matters of fiqh and matters of halal and haram. And that's why he says فهذه الآية تدل, this is an evidence, على أن كل واجب عجز عنه العبد أنه يسقط عنه. Every wajib, every obligation that the individual, the abd, is عاجز, have the inability to do it, أنه يسقط عنه. That means يسقط, falls. That means it's not obligatory upon him. So it's wajib, it continues to to be wajib. But upon that individual, according to the ummah in that status that it has, it's not having the capacity to do it. You see people, they need help, but you're not able to help them. And this is a wajib upon you, but you're not able to, then this obligation is not an obligation upon you anymore. But something else will become an obligation. And if a person understands this, he would understand then how to act. Because it's not permissible for us to commit sins thinking that this is how to attain something that Allah obligated upon us. So this is how the ayah is. وَأَنَّهُ إِذَا قَدَرَ. So the first meaning is that كل واجب عجز عنه العبد any wajib that a person is not able to do, then it's not wajib anymore. Is that it? No. وأنه more. وأنه إذا قدر على بعض المأمور. If a person is able, have the ability to establish some of what has been commanded to do, وعجز عن بعضه, and he has the inability to do some of it, فإنه يأتي بما يقدر عليه. So he has to, it's an obligation to do what he's able to do, ويسقط عنه ما يعجز عنه, and then it's not upon him as an obligation what he's not able to do. Right? And that's the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. إذا أمرتكم بأمر فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. If I command you to do something, then do of it the best of your ability, not your desires, but what is truly the best of your ability. And you can he would mention some of these. This is the qaida, this is a principle in the deen. You're commanded to make Salatul Fard standing. Right? So if you are, say, in the plane, right, and Salatul Fard has to be standing. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. If you're able to stand, you have to stand. If you're not able to stand, then you don't have to stand. That's not wajib on you anymore. But that doesn't mean that you would undermine other wajibat. So the same thing, if a person in the salah is not able to make sujood, that's the only thing that he's not able to make as a full sujood on the ground. But he's able to stand and he's able to make ruku'. So he has to stand and he has to make ruku'. The only position that he cannot make physically is the sujood. Because some people, if he's not able to make sujood, he sits in the salah from the beginning. You're able to stand. And so this is all of it or some of it. So that's why he says ويدخل تحت هذه القاعدة الشرعية من الفروع ما لا يدخل تحت الحصر. Comes under this religious principle from the branches and matters of ilm that you cannot really comprehend. Many different things, many things. You know, if even in the haram, when a person has to fall into the haram, but it's a must. Like then the least of it is what? And again, this is by ilm, not according again to one's desire. So to minimize the evil as much as a person can. Not to say, well, since it's haram, then you go to the end of it. And the same thing with matters of obligations. So this is فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. This is tafsir. So we just leave it like that, but to remember this qaida, this principle, and it's one of the great matters of knowledge, is that we know the principles, the foundations of things. So we can always relate things to it. So when someone is about to ask or have matters of learning, then what's the qaida used here? فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of your ability, because there's no other way out. If there's a way out, then a person has to take that, of course. And the second thing was وَاسْمَعُوا وَأَطِيعُوا. وَاسْمَعُوا وَأَطِيعُوا. Isma'u means listen, and أطيعوا means be obedient. That means اسمعوا ما يعظكم الله به. اسمعوا, listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is admonishing you with, reminding you of. وما يشرعه لكم من الأحكام, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislate for you from the ahkam, from the rulings. وَاعْلَمُوا ذَلِكَ وَانْقَادُوا لَهُ. Know it and submit yourself to it. And this is all وَاسْمَعُوا, not the سماع of كمثل الذي ينعق بما لا يسمع إلا دعاء ونداء. Not the سماع of the cattle and the sheep when they hear a voice. No, سماع تعقل, سماع that goes into the heart, that the person is listening to benefit, is listening because this is the command of Allah, is listening to apply, to submit, right? Not just listening. So as-sama' here has an act done by the heart. And this is also a detailed subject with as-sama'. وَأَطِيعُوا أي وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِكُمْ. Obey Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and that's the important again of knowledge and action. وَأَنْفِقُوا, and the third command Or the fourth one, وأنفقوا, and spend من النفقات الشرعية الواجبة والمستحب, from what is obligatory upon you religiously and what's recommended. يكن ذلك الفعل منكم خيرا لكم في الدنيا والآخرة. This will be these actions good for you in this life and in the hereafter. فإن الخير كله. These general statements has to be never challenged, that all of the خير, all of the good is في امتثال أوامر الله تعالى, in fulfilling the commands of Allah وقبول نصائحه, and to accept these commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is pure for our benefit, والانقياد لشرعه, and to submit ourselves to the shara of Allah. والشر كله في مخالفة ذلك, and all of the evil in the opposite of this, no exceptions whatsoever. This is without this, and the person does not understand what Al-Islam means. Al-Islam is not to pick and choose, is not desires, is not just to have some form of a flavor in our life. This has to be with this level of submission. ولكن, then he says, ولكن ثم آفة تمنع كثيرا من الناس. There's an آفة. آفة is when you have a disease or a mistake or a deficiency or a problem that prevents many people from النفقة المأمور بها, from spending what is upon them. وهو الشح, which is the شح. فاتقوا الله واسمعوا, فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم واسمعوا أطيعوا وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم. This is what is best for you. ومن يوق شح نفسه, warning against الشح. So this is the disease that prevents the person from all of what's mentioned before. الشح, as we talked about الشح before, this الشح, which is the highest level of greed, it's something that is in each and every one of us. So every single human being, they have a level of greed in them. وهو الشح المجبولة عليه أكثر النفوس. Most of the nufus having this greed, one way or the other. A person might be generous in money-wise, but he's greed with his own self, with his own benefit or own desires and things like this. فإنها تشح بالمال, has this greed when it comes to money. وتحب وجوده, نفسه loves to have money. وتكره خروجه من اليد غاية الكراهة, hates for its own money to leave its hands, to leave its account, to leave its possession. And this is a normal thing, and this is how we're tested by the love of what belongs to us. And how to overcome this in matters of Aqidah, belief that this is your spending from what Allah provided. So Allah is the owner. So you're just being Khalifa on the wealth, you've been entrusted with it. So this is a Aqidah, this is a belief. So to act upon the Aqidah makes it easy for the person to overcome the greed within his own self. فمن وقاه الله شر شح نفسه, يعني سمحت نفسه بالإنفاق. ومن يوقى شح نفسه, الوقاية is from التقوى, shielded. Whoever is protected, shielded from the greed of his own self, whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from the evil within his own self. And that's how the ayah states that it's from Allah. So to seek help from Allah, to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect oneself from the evil within oneself, one of which is الشح. فأولئك هم المفلحون, they are the successful ones. لأنهم أدركوا المطلوب ونجوا من المرهوب. They are مفلحون, and he always mention these two things. You would find it repeated many times in the Tafseer of Sa'di rahimahullah, because why they're muflihin, why they're successful, because they attained what they desire, what they seek, and they're saved from what they fear. And this is the two keys of happiness in this life. You cannot be happy if you just attain what you desire, what you want. Because if you're not saved from what you fear, that's not enough. So if someone desired to have $1 billion, but then he's not fearing, sickness or loss of life, whatever there is, what is the benefit if he get billions and then he get a disease that makes him not able to enjoy what he has? So both are the keys of success. And this is in the everlasting sense, is to be obedient to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. بل لعل ذلك, but he says, but maybe then شامل لكل ما أمر به العبد. This includes everything that the abd has been commanded to do ونهى عنه. So الشح here is not about money only. ومن يوق شح نفسه, not just the greed of the money, the greed of anything when it comes to the commands of Allah. So if a person wants to be obedient to Allah, search what are these commands or what are these things, you would find yourself resisting. It's the greed within your own self. There's a level of greed that needs to be removed. Even if you're the most generous with money, for example. He says, فإنه كانت نفسه شحيحة. If the nafs is shahiha, greedy, لا تنقاد لما أمرت به, does not have that submission to what has been commanded. ولا تخرج ما قبلها أو لا تخرج ما قبلها, that does not get out what it's been commanded with, لم يفلح. There's no success. بل خسر الدنيا والآخرة. So you have that generosity with oneself, and we talked about that. وإن كانت نفسه نفسا سمحة, if your nafs is the opposite of the الشح is السماحة, to be at ease. Your nafs, your being is at ease, مطمئنة, having that tranquility, منشرحة لشرع الله, having this openness and this ease to the deen of Allah, طالبة لمرضات الله, seeking the pleasure of Allah, فإنها ليس بينها وبين فعل ما كلفت به إلى العلم به. What is the most, or if the nafs is like this, the only thing that prevents it from fulfilling the commands of Allah is one thing only: al-ilm, knowing, not greed, not laziness, not what if this happened. It's already established on the position of submission. All of what it needs, just this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from it. Then it submits itself. So ووصول معرفتي إليه, to get to know. والبصيرة بأنه مرض لله تعالى, and to have the vision, the basira, that this is something that is pleasing to Allah. Then it just goes for it. وبذلك تفلح وتنجح وتفوز كل الفوز. Then this is how it becomes successful and attain all matters of goodness. So this is how the commands of Allah that we are supposed to follow to fulfill what has mentioned before. فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم واسمعوا وأطيعوا. And it's open again, اسمعوا وأطيعوا, also to anyone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to listen and to obey them. وأنفقوا خيرا لأنفسكم, and spend, and this is what is best for you. ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون. So because of the time, we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who listen and to fulfill these ayat and these verses of the Quran the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. The attendance code is listen, obey, spend. Listen, obey, spend. 3 words. Now, the feeling of the Sahaba, those who, as the ayat was revealed, they migrated later, and when they did, and they were late because of their spouses and their family and so on, so they became angry at their families because when they migrated later, they found the other Sahaba had surpassed them in virtue. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayat. This is one of the form of al-ghabn. This is the loss that a person gets and receives, but it's by the mercy of Allah. If a person is still alive, there's a way to fix it. But even if there's a way to fix it, but the one that was better, this is fadlullah yu'tihi man yasha. That's why it's never too late, but a person, they give the example of someone going up stairs or ladder, keeps on going, he did not stop. You start with him in the same time, the same pace, but then you stopped and he kept going. And then you realize that, oh, what am I doing? So you start going again, but he's already ahead of you. He never stops, but you stop. Yeah, you can reach, but he would reach before you. And this is how the levels of things, and this is all by the mercy of Allah. But we don't know that till everybody returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the ways that the heart goes ahead far more than the physical abilities of the person. And that's why a person has to be watchful of what's in the hearts. Allah make it easy. صلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.